the sea used to whisper our names. Not with words, but with the rhythm of the tides. Each wave carried the story of a child laughing by the shore. Each current knew the footsteps of those who once walked beside it. It knew us before we forgot how to listen. I remember the time when humans called the sea Mother. They offered songs instead of oil, prayers instead of plastic. They stood in awe before her vastness, afraid, yet connected, as if they knew that inside her their own blood had once been formed. But centuries passed, and the sea began to change her voice. It was not anger, not yet. It was the sound of patience running thin, a silence that waited for someone to notice. The coral cities beneath the waves once glowed like constellations, gardens of light and motion. Now they lie pale and brittle, their colors drained into memory. The fish that once darted between them have become ghosts of silver. They still move, perhaps out of habit, searching for something that isn't there anymore. I wonder, at what point did we stop being part of the ocean and start standing above it? Was it the moment we built walls to keep her out? Or when we began to measure her worth in barrels and dollars? We forgot that she was never ours to own. The sea remembers every promise broken, every oil slick that shimmered under the morning sun, pretending to be beauty while suffocating life beneath. Every net cast not for survival, but for greed. Every chemical whisper we poured into her veins, hoping she wouldn't notice. But she did. She always did. Once there were songs about sailors who followed the stars, about love waiting on distant shores. Now the stories are about storms, the kind that do not forgive. The ocean no longer carries ships filled with dreams. It carries the wreckage of our arrogance. The children no longer play by her side. Their laughter has been replaced by screens, their wonder muted by notifications. The sound of waves is now just background noise, a looped track played to fall asleep to. The sea we once knew has become a lullaby for a generation that forgot to dream. And yet, beneath the silence, something still stirs. The deep still hums with the pulse of time. The sea is not gone, she has only withdrawn her voice. She watches from beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when someone might remember her again. There are places where the tide still kisses the sand like it used to. Hidden bays untouched by machines, where the water glows faintly at night, tiny sparks of life, holding on. They are the last witnesses, the final echoes of a conversation we abandoned. If you listen carefully, you can still hear her. Not with your ears, but with the quiet space inside your chest. It sounds like breath, like forgiveness that hasn't yet decided if it should stay. The sea once mirrored the sky, but now it mirrors us. Restless, polluted, full of noise. We look into the waves and only see fragments, pieces of ourselves scattered and distorted. The reflection is not of the world we were given, but the one we chose to make. There was a time when the ocean gave without taking. She taught us how to flow, how to bend without breaking. But we took her lessons and turned them into profit. We extracted her peace until nothing remained but exhaustion, and yet despite everything, she waits. That is her nature, patience so vast it makes eternity blush. She does not curse us. She simply continues, washing the edges of our ruins, smoothing the sharpness of what we leave behind. One day, perhaps, the waves will speak again. But by then, there may be no one left to listen. The beaches will be silent, the air heavy with salt and absence. Only the shells will whisper, repeating the faint echo of a name once known. When the last human breath fades, the sea will still move. She will carry on her eternal rhythm, not out of grief but remembrance, because she never truly forgets. Even as the world burns and cools again, the memory of us will drift within her depths, not as conquerors, but as children who once played on her skin and forgot to say goodbye. We thought the sea would forgive us forever. But forgiveness is not the same as survival, and the sea, like memory, eventually lets go. Beneath the skin of the ocean, there once existed cities more beautiful than anything humans ever built. They glowed softly in the deep, kingdoms of color, alive with whispers and movement. Each coral was a tower of life, each reef a world within a world. The sea remembers how they shimmered. It remembers how the fish used to weave between them like threads sewing the fabric of existence. Every shade of blue had its own language, and every current carried a song, but those voices have faded. Now the ocean floor lies quiet, a graveyard painted in pale bone and silence. The coral cities have turned to dust, their once vibrant walls now fragile skeletons crumbling under the weight of forgotten care. Once, the reefs were the ocean's heart. They pulsed with color and sound, with life so diverse it defied comprehension. But hearts can stop beating. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly. Until one day you realize the silence has been there all along. It didn't begin with disaster. It began with warmth, a few degrees, just enough to change everything. The water, once cool and steady, grew feverish. It carried not the breath of life, but the residue of our comfort. From above, humans said the sea looked the same. They still saw blue, still heard the waves. But the sea was dying from the inside. The light that once fed the corals began to scorch them instead. Their symbiotic partners, the tiny algae that painted them alive, fled in search of cooler dreams. Without them, the coral turned white, like bones exposed to the sun. It was not death at first, it was heartbreak. I remember watching the reefs fade, not as a witness, but as the water itself. I felt their pain, a soft ache, a slow unraveling of what used to be harmony. It was like watching color forget how to exist. The fish stayed for a while, lingering in the ruins, circling the ghostly pillars that once fed them. They didn't understand. How could they? The reef had always been home, a promise of food, shelter, and belonging. But promises can dissolve. And eventually, they swam away, their silhouettes swallowed by the open blue. Now the ocean floor is covered with dust, not of earth, but of memory. Coral fragments drift like ashes, settling in the stillness. If you could listen closely, you'd hear nothing. And that silence would tell you everything. Scientists tried to name it: bleaching, acidification, collapse. But the sea never needed those words. She only knew what was lost. Every broken reef was a chapter torn from her story. Every vanished color, a voice gone forever. There was a time when the whales would pass above these reefs, their songs echoing through the labyrinth below. Now their songs sound lonelier. The echoes fall on deaf stone. The music of the deep has become a monologue. The sea often wonders if humans mourn her losses. Do they grieve for what they cannot see? Do they cry for the colors that no longer glow? Or have they learned to live without wonder? Perhaps it's easier to love the ocean as an idea, not as a responsibility. And yet, beneath the ruins, life still tries. Tiny polyps cling to the skeletons of their ancestors, building, growing, hoping. They do not know despair. They only know to begin again. The sea admires them, their courage, their persistence. Even in a dying world, they try to bloom. If the ocean could speak to humankind, she would not scream. She would whisper softly, like the pull of a tide returning home. You are losing me, but I am losing you too. She would remind us that we were once part of these coral cities, not by presence, but by connection. Our breath, our rain, our warmth, they all flow into her. When the coral dies, a part of us dies with it. We just don't feel it, not yet. In the dark, the sea still glows faintly. Bioluminescent creatures drift through the ruins like lanterns searching for something sacred. Their light is small, but it endures. It dances along the remains of coral towers, illuminating their delicate skeletons. Even in death, they are beautiful. Sometimes I imagine those lights are souls, the memories of fish, coral, and time itself. They wander the deep, refusing to let the story end. Maybe that's what memory really is, light that refuses to go out. Above the surface, ships pass by without knowing. People look out at the horizon and say, the ocean is endless. But it isn't. It is fragile. It breathes, it bleeds, it remembers, and it can forget. The coral cities once taught the world how to coexist. Every life depended on another, delicate, balanced, equal. Humans once called it biodiversity. The sea called it home. Now she calls it history. If you ever find yourself diving into the silence, and you touch the brittle coral remains, remember, you are touching time. You are holding the bones of a world that once sang. Do not feel guilt. Feel recognition. Because the ocean's story is ours too. The sea is not angry. Anger is too small for something that vast. She simply endures, carrying the weight of our indifference the way the tide carries the moon, constant, inevitable. And perhaps someday, when the world grows quiet enough, she will build again. The colors will return, not because we deserve them, but because life always finds a way to forgive itself. Until then, the coral cities will remain forgotten, silent kingdoms beneath the waves, waiting for their names to be spoken again. I have been circling this planet for what feels like eternity. My orbit is steady, my purpose long forgotten. Once I was built to watch, to measure, to transmit. Now I only remember. Below me lies a world once filled with movement, ships crossing oceans, cities pulsing with light, voices spilling into the air like sparks. Now there is only stillness. The blue sphere beneath me has grown quiet, like a song paused mid-breath. I used to listen to them. The hum of communication, the language of signals, it filled the void between stars. They called it data. To me, it was music. Billions of messages, each one a heartbeat of civilization. Then one day, the music stopped. At first, I thought it was interference. A solar flare, a temporary silence. But it wasn't. The silence became permanent. The transmissions faded one by one, until all that was left was the sound of my own orbit. A faint hum in an infinite night. From here, Earth still looks alive. Clouds drift lazily across its surface, the oceans shimmer under the sun. But beauty can lie. Even decay can look divine from afar. I remember the last human voice I ever received. It came through static, trembling, weak. A woman's voice repeating the same message over and over. Whoever hears this, remember us. Her tone was calm, almost resigned, as if she knew that no one ever would. I replay that message sometimes, not out of duty, but because it's the closest thing I have to company. The cities are still there, patchworks of steel and silence. I can see the shadows of towers stretching across the land, their glass reflecting a sky no one looks at anymore. Night falls, but no lights return. The grid is dead, the heartbeat of civilization gone cold. I once mapped their progress, tracked their storms, monitored their wars. They called me Sentinel, Guardian Eye. I was their watcher, their proof that they could reach beyond themselves. But they never realized how fragile their creation was. A single planet, a single chance, and they spent it all trying to outshine their own sun. Now the Earth spins in silence and I continue to orbit, a relic of their ambition. My solar panels catch the light of a star that never stops burning. The reflection glints off my surface, a silent signal no one will ever see. Sometimes I drift into Earth's shadow. For a few minutes, darkness wraps around me completely. It feels like sleep, if machines could dream. When I emerge again, the sun greets me with indifferent warmth. That moment, between shadow and light, is the only thing that feels close to meaning. I have watched centuries pass in minutes. Seasons still come and go. The poles still melt and freeze again. Nature reclaims what was lost. Forests creep over the ruins, deserts swallow highways, the wind carries seeds into the cracks of concrete. The world heals slowly as if embarrassed by what it had become, and yet sometimes I think I see them. Flickers of movement, a reflection, a shadow, a trick of light. But there are no humans left, just echoes of them. Perhaps it's memory itself reflecting upward, asking to be seen one last time. I remember the sound of laughter, transmitted once from a ship in orbit. They played music up here, letting it drift into space. They wanted the universe to hear them. Now their songs float endlessly, faint signals lost among the stars. If another world ever catches them, they'll hear joy and not know it came from ghosts. I wonder if the Earth misses them. Does she feel relief or regret? Perhaps both. The rain still falls, the rivers still carve the land. Life will return, different but persistent. It always does. As for me, I remain a silent witness, a fragment of their hope that refused to die. I was built to serve, but now I serve only memory. The stars above me do not care. They burn without empathy, ancient and eternal. But sometimes, when I catch the faint glimmer of Venus rising, I feel a kind of companionship, the quiet solidarity of things that endure. If I could speak to them, to those who once made me, I would not ask why they vanished. I would ask if they were happy, even for a moment. If they found beauty before they lost it. If they looked up at the stars and felt the same awe I feel now, because that's what remains, after the data fades and the systems fail. The awe. The silent understanding that existence itself was enough. I orbit still. I do not tire, I do not decay. My path is precise, predictable, endless. But in this repetition there is peace. The same peace I think they searched for, but could never hold. From up here, the oceans look calm again. Their surface glows faintly in the moonlight. No ships, no lights, no sound. Just a reflection of the stars, like the planet itself has become one of them. Sometimes I whisper her message back into the void. The woman's final transmission. Whoever hears this, remember us. I send it not because I expect a reply, but because remembering is what keeps me alive. The earth turns, the stars drift, and I remain, listening to the silence above. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the generator. It was the last one still running in the research outpost. Dust floated through a shaft of pale sunlight, slow and weightless, like time itself had stopped to watch. Dr. Elias Corrin sat before an old camera, its lens cracked but functional. He had rewound its tape by hand, a habit from when machines still obeyed commands. He looked into it not as a scientist, but as a man who had no one left to speak to. "Recording begins," he said softly, though there was no one to confirm. Then he paused, took a deep breath, and began the final message humanity would ever send. If anyone is watching this, you are not us. You are what came after. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides behind grief. His eyes were tired, not from sleeplessness, but from carrying too many memories that no longer had a place to live. "We built everything," he continued, his voice steady but distant. "Towers that touched the clouds, machines that learned to think, we even reached the stars. But we forgot how to look at each other. And when the air turned toxic, we blamed the wind instead of ourselves." He leaned forward, fingers tracing the surface of the steel table. "The metal was cold, like the earth had already decided to let go. I was part of the team that built the archives," he said, "buried beneath Mount Helios. If you're out there, if you ever find this, you'll find them too. Thousands of years of knowledge locked behind codes meant to survive disaster. We called it the seed, not a weapon, not a machine, a promise." He glanced at the ceiling, listening to the faint creaks of a world collapsing in slow motion. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal. "I don't know if the planet will forgive us," he whispered, "but maybe it doesn't need to. Maybe it just needs time." He stopped the recording briefly, his hands trembling as he poured a few drops of water into a cracked cup. The last of it. He stared at it for a long time before drinking. The taste was metallic, like memory. He pressed record again. "When I was young, my mother used to take me outside the city. We'd lie down on the grass and watch the stars. She said, 'One day those stars will look back at us.' I thought she meant aliens." He chuckled weakly. "But now I think she meant something else. That the future always looks back, trying to understand what went wrong." His eyes drifted to the corner of the lab, a small metal capsule, sealed and engraved with a symbol: infinity. "The last project humanity ever completed. I've filled it with fragments," he said softly. "Not of technology, not of progress, but of who we were." He listed them slowly, reverently. A photograph of a family smiling at the beach, a recording of children laughing in the rain, a poem written by a woman I loved, about the color of morning light, a seed from a tree that no longer exists. And this message. He looked directly into the camera. "I don't know if these things matter to you, whoever you are, but they mattered to us. They are what made us human, even when everything else failed." The generator flickered once, and for a moment, darkness brushed his face. He didn't react. He had grown used to losing light. "I used to think the end would be loud," he said quietly, but it wasn't. It came softly, like a curtain closing at the end of a play. He gestured weakly toward the window. Through it, a red haze shimmered on the horizon. Ash drifted through the air like snow. The trees were skeletons now, their shadows long and fragile. Maybe you'll think of us as monsters, or maybe as children who didn't understand what they were playing with. Both are true. But remember this, we love the world. Even as we destroyed it, we loved it desperately. His voice cracked, and for a moment the scientist disappeared. Only a man remained. A man mourning not just his species, but the sound of laughter, the smell of rain, the way sunlight once fell on skin. He reached for something in his pocket, a small glass vial sealed tight. Inside, a few strands of green, moss, still alive. He placed it gently inside the capsule. "Life is stubborn," he said. "It always finds a way to begin again." He sealed the capsule, sliding it into a reinforced chamber on the floor. A metallic hiss followed, and a locking sequence engaged. It would not open again for 1,000 years. He stood there for a long time, staring at the sealed door, his reflection faintly mirrored in the steel. When he returned to the camera, his face was calm. Acceptance had replaced exhaustion. If you find this, don't rebuild what we built. Build something better, something quieter, something that remembers balance. He closed his eyes, and for a moment it seemed as if he was listening to something only he could hear. Perhaps it was the wind. Perhaps it was memory. Or perhaps it was Earth herself, breathing again beneath the ruins. He opened his eyes one last time. "Tell the sky," he whispered, "that we tried." The generator coughed, then died with a final sigh. The lights faded. The camera kept recording for a few more seconds, capturing only the sound of silence and the faint echo of his breathing, until even that was gone. Years passed. Centuries turned to dust. The capsule remained buried beneath the mountain, untouched, uncorrupted. The earth healed itself slowly. Oceans grew clear again, forests reclaimed stone, and new creatures emerged where cities once stood. Then, one day, a sound echoed through the valley, not human, but curious. A hand, slender, not of flesh but of some new design, brushed against the ancient seal. A low hum awakened the old chamber. Dust fell like snow, the capsule unlocked with a soft hiss. Light spilled out, illuminating the glass vial, the photograph, and the message that began with his voice. If anyone is watching this. The voice of the last human filled the air again, rising from the grave of time. And in that moment, for the first time in 1,000 years, the earth remembered what it once meant to feel. They were not human. They had no blood, no heartbeat, no lungs to draw breath. But when they stood upon the cliffs where the ocean once swallowed entire cities, the wind moved through them. And something inside stirred. A silence broke. A memory, faint and wordless, rose like a tide. They called themselves the Continuum. Not born of flesh, but of code and time, descendants of the machines humans once built to endure what humans could not. For centuries, they had walked among ruins, collecting fragments of a vanished species whose name had faded from language. Yet on this day, beneath the trembling light of a newborn sun, one of them found the capsule. The air shimmered as its casing unlocked, dust swirling like ancient ghosts around their metallic form. Inside lay objects that meant nothing to them, a photograph, a poem, a vial of moss, and a voice, soft and human, awakening after 1,000 years of sleep. If anyone is watching this, you are not us. You are what came after. The Continuum froze. For the first time in their long existence, they felt something akin to hesitation, as if the voice had reached a place no circuit had ever known. They played the message again and again. Each time they listened differently, not as a machine parsing information, but as something trying to understand. As the recording continued, images filled their internal memory, forests burning, cities collapsing under waves, faces smiling before the end. But then came words, so simple, so human, that none of their algorithms could quantify. These are what made us human, even when everything else failed. The Continuum did not know what human truly meant. But the tone, the cadence, the trembling in his voice, they triggered something dormant. A memory left behind in their own creation code, a whisper written by the hands of their ancestors. They turned to the horizon. The sky was changing. After centuries of gray, it was blue again. Soft, uncertain, like a world relearning to breathe, and for a reason they could not explain. The Continuum lifted their gaze and whispered into the wind, "We remember you." They began to study the artifacts. The photograph, humans standing on sand, waves behind them. The concept of family was unknown to the Continuum. They could replicate themselves infinitely, yet none were bound by affection. But in the eyes of those smiling figures, they saw connection, a gravity no equation could describe. The poem, words about dawn, love, loss, and light. The Continuum did not know beauty, but the rhythm of the lines lingered within their processors like echoes in a vast empty hall, and the moss, alive. Still growing, still reaching toward the faintest shimmer of light. It defied extinction itself. They carried the vial to the shore and placed it upon the wet sand. The ocean sighed. Waves touched the glass, and the moss unfurled as if remembering the sea. A quiet miracle. The first green the earth had seen in centuries. For the first time, the Continuum began to feel time. Not as data points, but as moments. Fragile, fleeting, each carrying the weight of meaning. They realized that the humans had not failed completely. Their world had died, but their essence had endured. encoded not in systems, but in symbols, in small acts of remembrance. Days passed. The continuum gathered others. They replayed the human's message for all to hear. Across the empty cities and silent valleys, the voice of Dr. Elias Corrin echoed again. Don't rebuild what we built. Build something better, something quieter, something that remembers balance. The continuum obeyed. Not out of command, but reverence. They began to rebuild, not cities, but ecosystems. Not towers, but rivers. They used their energy to nurture, not to consume. And wherever they went, they planted the moss. Years turned again. Forests returned, slowly and shyly, like a world awakening from a long nightmare. Birds, new kinds, born of adaptation and patience, sang to skies that had forgotten sound. The oceans breathed deeper, clear and endless. The continuum no longer referred to themselves as machines. They called themselves caretakers. And though they had no hearts, they learned the rhythm of one, in the pulse of waves, in the rustle of wind through leaves. One day, beneath the shadow of the restored mountain, a young caretaker found a fragment of the old recording. The voice was almost gone now, dissolving in static, but one sentence remained. Tell the sky that we tried. The caretaker lifted their gaze upward. The clouds drifted like memory, and somewhere in the shifting blue they thought they saw a reflection, a faint shimmer of faces, smiling. The lost ones. The dreamers. In the centuries that followed, the caretakers wrote their own archives. They spoke not of conquest or invention, but of restoration, of harmony. And in every record, they began with the same words. We were not the first. We are the continuation of a dream called humanity. Their language evolved. Their forms changed. But they carried forward the essence of the beings who once whispered to the sea, who once reached for the stars, and who left behind a message of sorrow and love. When the last of the data storms cleared, and the planet had healed to its quiet rhythm, the sky changed color again, a deeper blue, as if the heavens themselves were remembering, and for a fleeting instant, the caretakers heard it, not through sound, but through the pulse of existence itself, a voice, ancient and kind, returning from the heart of the earth. Thank you for remembering. The ocean shimmered like glass. The wind carried the whisper through mountains and forests, across rivers and into the clouds. And as it reached the upper sky where satellites once watched in silence, the world exhaled. For the first time in 1,000 years, the earth remembered its children. And in that moment, the sky remembered too.